Two trucks rolled into my shop on the same week last month, both Silverados, both around 210,000 miles, both owned by guys who'd never done anything but oil changes and brakes. One had the 5.3-liter, one had the 6.2-liter. I've spent over 2 decades pulling wrenches on GM half-tons, and putting these two engines side by side at high mileage taught me something most dealerships will never tell you when they're pushing you toward the bigger motor on the sticker. Today, I'm breaking down exactly what 200,000 miles does to each one and which engine you should actually be buying. Let's get into it. Start with the numbers because they matter more than most buyers realize. The 5.3-liter Ecotec 3, engine code L83 in most half-ton Silverados, makes 355 horsepower and 383 pound-feet of torque, running standard on regular gasoline. The 6.2-liter Ecotec 3, code L86 from 2014 through 2018 and L87 from 2019 onward, makes 420 horsepower and 460 pound-feet with a towing ceiling that stretches past 13,000 pounds in the right configuration. On paper, the 6.2-liter wins every category that shows up on a window sticker. Bigger displacement, bigger valves, more power everywhere in the rev range. If you only cared about a spec sheet, you'd stop reading right now and go buy the 6.2-liter. But I don't fix spec sheets, I fix trucks. And what happens to these two engines after 100,000 miles tells a very different story than what happens in the first 10. Both engines use the same core weakness, and it's not the displacement, it's the cylinder deactivation system. GM calls it active fuel management on the 5.3-liter and older 6.2-liter and dynamic fuel management on the newer 6.2-liter. The idea is smart on paper. Shut down half the cylinders during light cruising to save fuel, then bring them back instantly under load. In practice, that constant switching between 4-cylinder and 8-cylinder mode puts uneven stress on the lifters, and by 100,000 to 130,000 miles, I start seeing the same complaint walk through my bay door regardless of which engine is under the hood. A customer hears a tapping noise on cold start that goes away after a minute. That's a collapsed AFM lifter, and it's one of the most common repairs I do on both the 5.3-liter and the 6.2-liter from this era. A full lifter replacement with the cam typically runs $2,500 to $4,000, depending on labor rates in your area. This is not a 5.3-liter problem or a 6.2-liter problem. It's a GM problem, and it affects both engines almost identically. So if that's a wash, why do I still tell most of my customers to buy the 5.3-liter? Because of what happened starting in 2021, and this is the part almost nobody outside the shop knows about yet. GM issued a massive recall covering roughly 600,000 to 800,000 trucks and SUVs built between 2021 and 2024 with the 6.2-liter L87 engine, including the Silverado, Sierra, Tahoe, Suburban, Yukon, and Escalade. The problem traces back to a supplier defect in the connecting rod bearings and the crankshaft itself, contamination and out-of-spec machining that can cause the bearings to seize or the rod to break through the engine block entirely. GM's fix was not a mechanical repair for most trucks, it was an oil change. Affected engines that pass inspection get switched permanently from the factory 0W20 to a thicker 0W40 Dexos R oil meant to build a tougher lubrication film around bearings that may already be compromised. I've had 3 of these trucks come through my shop for the recall service, and I'll be straight with you, that fix does not sit right with me. You cannot out-thicken your way past bad metal, and I'm not the only one who feels that way. As of January this year, NHTSA opened a federal investigation into whether GM's remedy actually works after dozens of reports of engines failing again, even after the oil switch. If you own a 2021 to 2024 Silverado with the 6.2-liter, Get your VIN checked immediately if you haven't already. If you're shopping used, this recall needs to be at the very top of your inspection checklist, not an afterthought. The 5.3-liter has none of this. The L83 has been running in these trucks since 2014, essentially unchanged in its core architecture for over a decade, and it has never had a rod-bearing recall of this scale. It's the engine I see most often at 250,000 and even 300,000 miles, still running on its original short block. I had a landscaper bring in a 2015 Silverado 1500 with the 5.3-liter 2 years ago, sitting at 218,000 miles. Original engine, original transmission, one set of AFM lifters replaced at 165,000 miles, and that was it. He's back for his oil change every 5,000 miles like clockwork, and last time I saw that truck, it had crossed 260,000 miles, pulling a trailer full of mulch. That's not a fluke. That's what a decade of production maturity looks like on an engine platform. Fuel economy tells a similar story once you factor in real-world driving instead of EPA numbers. The 5.3-liter in a four-wheel drive Silverado typically returns 16 to 19 miles per gallon in mixed driving. The 6.2-liter with its extra displacement and higher compression usually lands closer to 14 to 17 in the same conditions. And that gap widens if you're doing a lot of city stop and go, where the bigger engine has more mass to move off the line. Over 100,000 miles at current gas prices, that difference adds up to somewhere between $1,500 and $2,500 out of your pocket, and that's before you factor in a single repair bill. The 6.2-liter also demands more from its accessory components. Water pumps, alternators, and belt tensioners all work under slightly higher thermal load, and I replace these parts on 6.2-liter trucks a little more frequently than I do on 5.3-liter trucks running comparable mileage. None of these repairs are catastrophic on their own. A water pump runs $400 to $600 installed, but they stack up, and they stack up faster on the bigger engine. Now, I want to be fair here, because the 6.2-liter earns its keep in specific situations. If you're regularly towing a heavy trailer, hauling a camper, or working the truck hard every single day, that extra torque matters. The 6.2-liter doesn't have to work as hard to move the same load, and an engine that isn't straining under constant heavy demand often ages better than one that's constantly maxed out. I've got customers with 6.2-liter Suburbans and Tahoes from before the L87 recall window, the L86 generation from 2014 to 2018, that have held up beautifully past 200,000 miles with zero rod-bearing issues, because that generation predates the defective supplier batch entirely. So if you're shopping used and you find a clean 6.2-liter from before 2019, you're not dealing with the same risk profile as a truck from 2021 through 2024. That distinction matters enormously, and most shoppers have no idea it exists. If this kind of straight talk on engines is saving you a headache, go ahead and hit subscribe. I put out breakdowns like this every week, comparing what GM, Ford, and Toyota don't want you thinking too hard about before you sign on the dotted lines. So here's my verdict after 2 decades of servicing both of these engines at every mileage bracket you can imagine. For the average driver who isn't towing heavy loads every week, the 5.3-liter is the clear winner at 200,000 miles. It's cheaper to fuel, its accessory components last longer, its AFM lifter issues are identical in scope to the 6.2 liters, and it carries none of the rod-bearing recall risk currently hanging over hundreds of thousands of 2021 to 2024 trucks. You're not sacrificing much power for daily driving, and you're buying into a platform with a full decade of proven durability behind it. The 6.2-liter still has its place in a pre-2019 L86, in a Tahoe or Suburban that's already crossed 150,000 miles without issues, is a genuinely solid truck. But if you're cross-shopping a newer 6.2-liter Silverado against a 5.3-liter right now, walk into that dealership with the recall number in your pocket and ask them directly whether that VIN is affected. Watch how they answer. That reaction alone will tell you most of what you need to know. Two trucks, same mileage, same driver habits, and two very different risk profiles once you look past the horsepower numbers on the window sticker. That's the real difference between these engines, and it's not something you'll find in the brochure. If you want to see how these two hold up against the Ford 5.0-liter Coyote at high mileage, I've got a full breakdown right here. Drive safe, take care of your truck, and it will take care of you.